because that's really the issue. So what happens in these relationships? The patterns we see in these relationships include invalidation, minimization. So there's a lot of pain comparison. There is a lot of anger and rage. And it feels unpredictable, like living with a grenade. You never know what's going to set them off, right? And tons of manipulation. And it's so important to know what manipulation is. Manipulation is somebody drawing you into doing something that is in the manipulator's best interests, but leaving you feeling that it's in yours. The primary form of manipulation in a narcissistic relationship is a term called gaslighting. Do you have an Arabic equivalent word for gaslighting? Probably not, because it's a very unique word. Gaslight is from in the times before electric lights in the streets or in a house. There are the lights in a house that were operated by gas. And the way a gaslight system worked is if multiple lights were running, all the lights would get dimmer. So each time you put on another gas light, because there's a finite amount of gas running through the line, the lights would get dimmer. And if we have the time, I'm going to go over types of gaslighting that you didn't even know were gaslighting, because you'll say, oh, I've really been manipulated. So we'll, if we can loop back to that, not that I want to have you leaving here saying, I'm a very manipulated person, but it gives you some context, right? But there's other patterns here too. Narcissistic relationships, every single time, are characterized by betrayal. A betrayal is a breach of trust in a relationship with someone where trust felt almost ironclad and built in. The trust of a parent, the trust of a sibling, the trust of a partner. So when a partner is unfaithful, it shatters that contract of the relationship, right? And so now this fundamental thing, it would be like if this stage gave way from right now. I trust this stage. I mean, I literally probably would feel betrayed by this stage. Like, this is supposed to be a piece of furniture that's holding me up. Well, betrayal is that breach of trust. And when we're betrayed, we feel unsafe. Because now we don't know what to trust. Because we inherently trusted a spouse, or a parent, or an employer. And when those settings betray us, and they don't really take accountability, not only do we feel completely unsettled, but we need to make the world right again. So if the betrayer doesn't take accountability, what do we do? Okay, how'd that work out for you? Not so good. And after you argued with them and it didn't work, we blame ourselves. We blame ourselves. We don't always leave because we can't imagine it's your parent. You're just going to leave your parent? Because parents betray all the time. Parents break trust all the time. Parents don't cheat on you, but your parent may share information you ask them to never share with someone again. They'll go and tell a sibling something you didn't want them to say. That's a betrayal. What happens in narcissistic relationships can be characterized as a betrayal trauma. And what we know about betrayal trauma is it does significant harm to the person being betrayed. And all narcissistic people betray other people. It's the nature of the relationship. The other things that we see happen in these relationships are domination patterns, control, and overpowering someone. So over time, many people have said to me, many people, you know, when I got into this relationship, I was kind of at the top of my game. I was doing things I wanted. I liked my career. I felt good about myself. So then 2 years, 5 years, 10 years later, they'll say, I was a hollowed out shell of myself. I wasn't that when this began. Why? Because the relationship only works when it's asymmetric. It has to be this. And any attempts to bring it to balance will be rapidly taken back. Okay? And then finally, other sorts of patterns we see is there's a lot of manipulation of even promises. I promise we're going to move closer to your parents in about 2 years when I get that promotion. Well, you can't press fast forward on 2 years to see if they're going to do it. You got to wait to 2 years. 2 years happens, you don't move. That's not only a manipulation, but many people find akin to the gaslighting. If you go back and say, hey, I am going to You said we were going to move, right? And we didn't move. Then the narcissistic person say, really? Do you keep some kind of crazy calendar on me? What, do you have some sort of obsessive disorder? So now you're the one with the problem, right? So even when you try to have that argument, as one of you said up there you would do, you really can't. Because the pattern that keeps us stuck in these relationships is something called cognitive dissonance, which many of you learned in your introductory psychology classes. Well, here's where it becomes really useful to understand this. Cognitive dissonance is the tension we feel in our psyches when things don't fit well. It started, Aesop wrote the fable, 3,000-4,000 years ago, when the fox couldn't get the grapes, right? What did the fox say? He said, they're sour. But they looked really good. They weren't sour. But the fox had to tell himself that to tolerate not being able to get that. So if you're in a narcissistic relationship of any kind, parent, partner, you name it, and you don't feel ready to leave the relationship, you say, maybe I'm the problem, or I'm making too big a deal out of this, or they're having a stressful week. You say something to correct the tension, and over time that becomes your habit, and that's where that self-blame comes from. Okay? So let's then talk about what these relationships do to the people in them, because that's really where people get thrown off. Those of you who are therapists, really pay attention to this piece of it, because this is where, this is what I'm going to be talking about with some therapists tomorrow here in Doha, is this issue of how do we do antagonism-informed work with a client? How do we be informed about what could be happening in their relationship? So let's imagine the lens is this small, all right? The patient comes into my office and sits in front of me and says, Doc, I am anxious, I am sad, I don't know, I feel like I'm a bad person, I'm having these marriage problems, and I don't know, like I can't sleep, I'm always ruminating, I'm obsessing. Until the last 10 years, 5 years, maybe last week, many therapists were saying, oh, you have an anxiety disorder, maybe you have depression. Open the lens. Tell me what's happening in your marriage. And once I hear that, those antagonistic patterns are coming at me, then I'm like, And then you start teaching a person, say, this is not healthy in a relationship. How many of you ever had someone sit down with you deliberately when you were an adolescent or in puberty, middle school age, and tell you, this is what a healthy relationship looks like? Taught you this. No. Sat down and taught you, step by step. This is what, because somebody sat down and said, you should go to college, or you should do this, and blah, 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 blah. But did anyone ever sit down and tell you? No, they didn't. Nobody really knows. And as a result, that can mean, because let me tell you something about narcissism. These are people who look fantastic on paper. And that is how we train young people to find partners. Oh, they went to the right school. Oh, they're from the right family. Oh, we know this one. That, all this nonsense. Never once are questions like, is this person kind, compassionate, respectful? How do they regulate their emotions? How many of you were taught to ask for that? Where did they go to school? What do they do for a living? Who is their family? And that misses what will create a relationship that will be healthy and sustainable in the long term. Okay? So when people are in these relationships, they come into therapist offices, or maybe they don't, and they suffer silently with anxiety, rumination, regret, self-blame, self-doubt, sometimes even intrusive thoughts. They're anxious, they're sad, at times angry. They have trouble sleeping, of course, because they're ruminating. Appetite might change. This sense of loneliness and isolation, because they say, no one's going to understand this because everybody likes them so much. Everybody thinks I have the best mother in the world. What a wonderful woman your mother is. And you're like, I can't tell them the truth, because you don't want to make your family look bad. You don't want to also think, maybe I'm reading this wrong, or what a nice husband you have. You're so lucky you have a beautiful home. I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with who said we had the most beautiful home. We had all these photographs on the wall. If you looked at the pictures, it looked perfect, and I was dying inside. And when somebody finally explained to me what was happening, for the first time I stopped feeling crazy. to get that understand doesn't mean you have to leave. Because I was saying this to Tina in the car, one of the big issues, one of the questions, because a lot of people say, I'm so dumb. It's so clear this was happening for 20 years. You're not dumb. You always have to ask yourself, whoever the relationship is with, what would this have psychologically cost me to see this clearly? What would this have psychologically cost me to see this clearly? Maybe it would have cost you no longer idealizing a parent or a family. Maybe it would have cost you feeling like, this is really unhealthy for me. I have to disengage from these folks, and what I can't really do that. Maybe it'll cost you, like, if this is really what I think this is, if I really think they're being inappropriate with this other person, does that mean I have to get a divorce? But the only path forward to healing is to see it clearly. Because otherwise, you're going to have this really heavy bag on your back where you're carrying the narcissistic person's shame. The point I really want to make to you is understanding this doesn't mean leaving, doesn't mean divorcing your parent, doesn't even mean divorcing your partner, it doesn't mean ending the friendship, and it doesn't mean quitting the job. Heaven knows those are things that would make your life a lot easier, but that is not an option open to most of us. And I say this culturally. I grew up in a very traditional South Asian home. And I have many narcissistic people scattered throughout my family system, which seems to be something in my culture, which I'm owning. And I can say that because it's my culture. And I saw it play out left and right. It was intergenerational. Father to son, grandfather to father to son. You would see this play out over and over again. I still have a lot of contact with my family. The difference is I no longer am playing their ground game. And this is what I'm teaching people to do. You can show up to the dinner, but you're not going to engage in their nonsense. You're not going to play their game. You're not going to take their bait. So those are the ways we can move forward. There's another piece I want to teach you about, because I think that there's a lot of people making whack-ass TikTok videos about this, and they are so wrong. So we're just going to do a bit of TikTok cleanup, okay? Which is, there's this concept of trauma bonding, okay? Everybody's getting it wrong. After tonight, I'm going to know there's a group of about 100 people in Doha who know exactly what this term means, okay? So trauma bonding. A lot of people think trauma bonding is falling in love with, is having a relationship or being in love, loving someone who went through trauma. So they had a trauma, you had a trauma, oh, we both had trauma, let's be in love, right? Or you go through something traumatic, right? And someone else is going through it at the same time, and you fall. Did any of you ever see the Keanu Reeves film with Sandra Bullock, Speed, where the boss couldn't go under a certain speed, and then they fall in love? People think that's trauma bonding. That is not. That's whatever that is, but that's not trauma bonding, okay? Trauma bonding is what feels like an almost physiologically unbreakable connection that we have with someone, where the relationship goes between praise and criticism, idealization and devaluation, great days and bad days. You go from love bombing to what the hell is this, okay? And that backing and forth, just when you think like, oh, okay, this is very unhealthy, they show up with a bunch of flowers. Or just when you say, oh, this is so, I gotta get out of this, let's go on vacation. Or you're like, I am not talking to my mother anymore, and she gives you a little book of pictures she made, right? And you're thinking, they're messing with me. But no, that's that variable empathy. And that, do you have slot machines? Do you have casinos? No. Have any of you ever played a slot machine? Do you know what a slot machine is? You push the handle and the pictures have to come up. Why would anyone do that?
Because of the investment.
Because of what?
The investment.
The investment in what?
Time, money.
But why do you keep doing it? You want to win what?
For the
How
return.
much money? A lot. Okay, so in the United States we have these slot machines. You put in $1, you might win $1 million, right? But if I put in $1 and it gives me back $2, I put in $1, it gives me back $3. That's not very fun, is it? But I keep, and sometimes it takes 10 of my dollars. But I keep playing because I think the big magical thing's going to happen. And that's what a trauma bonded relationship is about. I can't leave because what if they change for the next person? I can't leave because I don't know, like maybe they're going to go to therapy and get better. And that takes us to the most painful truth of all of this. This is this thing I call, many of us call, radical acceptance. This is a personality style that doesn't change. It doesn't change. The gal who gets into the arguments there in the fifth row just got one heck of a look on her face. It doesn't really change. Never enough to make a difference for you.
No, I leave, but I hope they change.
You know, we're going to take care of that tonight. No, I'm stealing your hope tonight. Okay? So, that hope, though, and you throw other things on that list. Hope, love, you have genuine love. A lot of people feel ashamed that they have love for the narcissistic person, but we love them. These are our friends, our family members. As much as we think, oh my gosh, you're a cheating fool and I can't believe I'm married to you, something about you I love, something I fell in love with once. That's why this is hard. There is love there. There is hopeful love. Maybe they're changed. We're sweeping that one out tonight. There is a fear. There are practical reasons, minor children, financial issues, cultural issues, and stigma around you can't just end a relationship with a family. You really can't. In many cultures, it's just not going to fly. It would pull you out of a very, very integral support system, right? So it doesn't really change. I've been doing this a long time. Is it possible we can see small behavioral shifts in narcissistic people and it might be just enough to keep us in the game? Sure. Only you know how much that is. For some people, they'll say, you know what? They give me their phone every night so I can see if they're cheating. Of course, I want to tell them, he's got another phone. But or plumber is not who you think it is, okay? But it is, for some people, it's, my mother no longer brings up my weight, right? Or my mother no longer talks to me about my kids, and we made that as sort of our no-fly zone. But whatever it is, so everyone finds their place with it. For some people, they're like, I can't tolerate this. This is too triggering for me. Others, they say, okay, this can happen, and they've learned to not do this, or they're actually trying this. It still is not, is it ever going to be a fulfilling, deep, healthy, empathic, mutual relationship? Never. Never. Can it be something you might be able to tolerate? That's up to you. Okay? But having that radical acceptance that not only is it not going to change significantly, but you also have to remember it's never going to stop hurting you. It's never going to stop hurting you. And that's when people say, Dr. Romani, I radically accepted, and my father still hurts my feelings. And I'm like, well, yeah, what he's saying is hurtful. We don't want you to lose that part. That hurts. Okay? That hurts when that happens. So holding on, understanding that this will hurt, and part of the radical acceptance is that it is going to hurt. So what does healing involve? Understanding what it is, being compassionate with yourself, having sources of support where you feel validated and people are saying, this is not okay. If you have some places in your life where you feel seen and heard and valued, I'm not saying that these relationships are ever going to be easy, but somehow you recognize that there is a difference between a rainy and a sunny day because you're experiencing both of them. And you say, okay, I can disengage from this narcissistic relationship. In fact, I often use the acronym, don't go deep. What by that I mean, don't defend yourself, don't explain yourself, don't engage, and don't personalize it. When you're being dismissively treated by the narcissistic person, I'm thinking anyone in the seat with them is going to be treated the same way. This isn't a you thing, it's a them thing. Thus the title of the book, right? And so that takes us to the final point I want to make before we then come together in this round table. A lot of people say, should I forgive the narcissistic person? In general, I say, it's not going to make your healing go better, and your forgiveness isn't going to change that. And if you're forgiving because you think you're supposed to forgive, you can do what you want to do. But the research shows that forgiving someone who doesn't change their behavior actually harms us quite a bit. Because forgiveness is a sacred state. If any of you have ever been given forgiveness, you received it as such. And I hope you changed your behavior. And you saw how it became a place to heal a rupture. But when you've forgiven someone who keeps doing the same thing to you, keeps lying to you, keeps violating your confidence, keeps screaming at you or raging at you or leaving you feel unsafe, then you feel foolish. But if you don't forgive, you're often shamed. Oh, what's wrong with you? Why can't you just forgive? If you don't forgive someone, which I actually recommend many times, especially in protracted narcissistic relationships where change isn't coming, don't broadcast it. Don't walk up to if I'm going to leave you with 3 last takeaways. Don't walk up to the narcissistic person saying, I figured it out, you're narcissistic. Don't give away your hand. Don't turn your cards around and say, look what I got. No. Knowing this becomes a superpower of sorts, like, now I know how to navigate this. Number 2, don't say to them, stop gaslighting me. The whole idea of gaslighting is to overpower you. It's not a lie. When you show them the text message, do you see what you wrote? You know what they're going to say? Oh my gosh, I'm in a relationship with a crazy person who shows me these text messages. Are you paranoid? Maybe you need to see a psychiatrist or for medicine. That's what you're going to hear. This showing them the evidence doesn't work in gaslighting. So don't tell them. And finally, if you're not going to forgive them, don't tell them. And don't tell your family. And don't tell other people. That is something you hold inside of you. And say, I know they're going to do this again. And I don't forgive this. And I have done the work to understand how I'm going to navigate this, whether it's cutting them out of my life or really being disengaged, but sort of showing up superficially. So I hope this primer kind of has oriented you. If you want, there you go, there's the library. It's just sort of the library talking at you. But especially It's Not You gets into the healing piece of it. But I hope this sort of answers some of your rudimentary questions on it. So this is a huge topic. This is I'm trying to take 20 years of work and do it in 45 minutes. But I hope this was helpful. And obviously if there's questions or whatnot for the roundtable, I'm gonna pass it back to Tina. And I want to thank you for your time and attention.